So good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled that you're all staying here despite the beautiful weather out there. It's much more fun and interesting in here. So first, why don't we do a round of introduction? I'm Michael Fassnacht. I run World Business Chicago, the economic development arm for the city and the region. And people from the outside of Chicago, welcome to the greatest city in the world. Why don't we start with Ted? Just tell a little bit like your story. What qualifies you to be here today and talk about innovation?
I totally walked in off the street. So my name's Ted Souder, and I was one of Google's earliest employees. And I worked there both in Chicago and in Paris, France for over 20 years, working with some of the biggest retailers, travel companies, et cetera, with their digital transformation strategies. And now I spend a lot of my time working with business leaders and government leaders, actually a lot of times outside of the US, on how do we grow and develop and support entrepreneurial ecosystems. And so we're supporting the founders, the startups, and all in the name of economic vitality, job creation, and whatnot. So it's a great time to be an entrepreneur, and Chicago is a great place to do that.
Hi, I'm Sonia Nagar, and I'm here because I'm one of Chicago's biggest cheerleaders. My husband and I chose to come back to Chicago after living on both coasts. So I started off in engineering, then was out east at business school. Then 15 years ago, I was at Amazon as part of the team that launched the clothing category. Then went to New York while my husband was doing his MBA and founded a mobile shopping startup. That startup was acquired in 2014 by a company called Retail Me Not that was based out of Austin. So as part of that acquisition, I moved to Austin and ran their mobile engineering team for 2 years. And then when my earnout was up, I was ready to start another company. I was pregnant with my first child. I could not convince my husband to go to Austin. He could not convince me to go to New York. And we agreed that we wanted to come back to our roots. We were both from the Midwest. We looked at all the cities and we picked Chicago as where we wanted to start our family and where we wanted to build our careers. I ended up not founding a business because as I was networking with venture capitalists in Chicago, I met the Pritzker group. They liked my background and they asked me if I'd ever thought about being an investor. That was 7 years ago, and I've realized that it's a lot easier on this side of the table than the founder side of the table, so I have a lot of respect and appreciation for everybody, especially the serial founders out there that go back and are gluttons for punishment, but very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sonia. What a story. Keating.
Hello, I'm Keating Crown, Managing Principal at Sterling Bay. If you were expecting Andy Glore, I apologize.
We got upgraded, so thank you, Keating.
I was notified this morning that he's under the weather, so I'll do my best. I have some notes in case I don't stand up to it. But born and raised in Chicago, lifelong Chicago, but for a stint in New York for 10 years. And why I'm qualified, along with my partners at Sterling Bay, we're building spaces like this around the country for innovators and for life science. But we're starting here in Chicago, where we're all born and raised. Creating spaces like this to hopefully resonate with folks. We also spend most of our time trying to attract companies to Chicago, along with Michael.
Thank you, Keating. And people who don't know, people from Chicago, he's the really brain and driving force behind the 606 that we started. And I know I'm having big hopes to continue this through the lakefront. So whoever uses 606, stop and just say thank you, Keating. So let's talk maybe first high-level innovation. What do you think are we doing well in Chicago? Maybe one thing that you think we're really world-class in. What is the one area we have work to do? Why don't we start with Sonia first, then we get Keating and then Ted.
Yeah, so I think at the earliest stages, Chicago has done a great job creating community. So both Ted and I are involved with 1871. I think that's a great place for people to figure out how to start a startup. I think there's been an explosion of early stage venture capital firms at the pre-seed and seed stage. Where I think we're lacking is the later stages. Once startups start to take off, get to the later stages, we don't have enough growth capital and enough support peer companies for some of those growth companies. And so that's the one thing I worry about is, you don't want to lose those growth companies when they're taking off. There's pressure sometimes from larger investors to take your companies to the coast. So.
Keating?
I think we've got a great relationship, especially with Michael, between the business community and World Business Chicago, and hopefully here with the new administration we'll improve upon that, which I think has been lacking over the last 4 years. But groups like 1871, and then just some of the dynamics regarding Chicago. We're in the middle of the country, easy to get anywhere. And the cost of doing business here, the cost of employment is lower than the coast. And I think that really helps from attracting employees and attracting people to Chicago. And then hopefully we'll help by building spaces like this that bring people together and convene and help with some of that collaboration.
Thank you, Ted.
I love the idea that we are very diverse and distributed. That what is the 12%, or there's no industry that owns over 12% of the economy, give or take. And that really bodes well for our future, that we're going to have lots of different industries represented, lots of different communities that are going to be built around these different industries. And from an investment standpoint, we're going to bring in lots of different target groups who want to focus on healthcare or fintech or supply chain or manufacturing, et cetera. So having all of these different communities coming together and building these ecosystems is one of our great, great strengths. This might be a little controversial, looking at thinking about what we need to develop. I think we need to celebrate the past. We need to be happy about what Chicago has done. But I think in some respects we have some reputational things that give Chicago an interesting name when people are considering where to move. And we're open on that.
Thank you all. Let's talk about the current investment climate. Like 2021, 2022 were record years of influx in both venture capital and private equity investments, each like 10 billion. So we had both record-breaking years. Clearly this year has slowed down significantly. What's your take on the industry you're focusing on? Let's start first with Keating, then Ted, then Sonia. What's your current take? Well, how are we doing? What are you hearing? Just your current take of the state.
Sure, I think investors want predictability. And when Ted talks about some of the headwinds of crime and real estate taxes and other taxes added on, that limits the predictability that especially institutional capital is willing to invest in a city. So I think, again, the collaboration with the mayor's office and Web3 Chicago is really helpful in creating an environment where investors know what is to come. Because when they don't, it's a little heavy-handed to say Chicago's redlined in certain respects, but it's an uphill battle for sure.
Ted?
So looking at my Twitter feed and my LinkedIn feed, I'm the only person not in venture capital. We have an incredible venture capital community here in Chicago, and really led by kind of an old guard, Pritzker, and the Crown family has been such great investors in our community and whatnot. But the energy we have around younger venture capitalists, younger investors, really starting to navigate their way through the community up and down the river to find those startups, to find those investable founders, there's a ton of energy behind that. And I think that that's going to bode well for our future, in that these are the next generation of Pritzkers, for example, where we'll get together maybe as a group in 5, 10, 15 years, and what is Drive Capital today is now like the leading VC firm in Chicago. So there's just a ton of energy happening, and that's going to continue.
And not to interrupt, but I just add to that, if you look at where we sit in the Midwest and the universities and healthcare systems around us, and we should be attracting that talent, and we are attracting a lot of it. We lose a little bit of it. We lose a little bit from University of Illinois, but if we can continue to attract that talent from our backyard, it will be really positive for the growth here.
Sonia?
Yeah, I mean, I think for all the bad things that happened in 2021 from an investment discipline perspective, there was a lot of money that opened up and flowed into emerging managers, which has created an ecosystem at the earliest stages that has a lot of dry powder to go invest in startups. So there has never been a better time to start a company and to find pre-seed, seed, and even Series A funding. There's still a lot of money there. Where we're seeing a lot of doom and gloom and issues is at the later stages where, in 2021, in the first half of the year, there were 521 IPOs, and in that same period this year, there were only 10 that raised over $100 million. So it's like a huge slowdown at the later stages, and so that has some implications on, for the more mature companies, what their outlook is, and that's the doom and gloom. But the good news is, early stages, I feel like it's business as usual. People are still investing. There's a lot of activity. There's still competition for deals. Like, I just had to compete on a term sheet. So if you're an early stage founder, everything is good. If you're a later stage founder, conserve cash and just make sure that you control your own destiny.
Let's talk about mega trends that you're seeing and betting on, because I think this industry is always very good about the next shiny thing, from blockchain, then was crypto, then was AI. Instead of looking a little bit beyond the noise of today, like what are like 2 or 3 mega trends that you are seeing that might be also beneficial for our region, our city here, that you would bet on or that you are betting on, either individually, professionally, with your capital? Ted, why don't we start with you? Anything that you are passionate about right now that is not just the noise of today?
Well, everyone wants to say AI, of course, but I'll let others talk about that. One of the biggest megatrends that we see, and this is from my history at Google, is the impact that technology is having on all of these businesses that are not tech-centric. Here in the Midwest, we have lots of businesses that are maybe family-owned or manufacturing or more traditional type businesses that startups and communities here in Chicago are able to go to Racine, they're able to go to Rockford, and they're able to inject tech solutions or platforms into these more traditional businesses, which will then bring them an entire new generation of income opportunities. So it's the tech impact on more traditional industries centered here in Chicago, I think is one of the most exciting things happening.
Sonia?
I actually am a huge +1 on that. So that's my current investing thesis, is digitizing old line industries. And like there's some business model twists on that too. But if you think about, there's a lot of funds that are emerging to invest in infrastructure. And they're one of the last categories that has yet to have major innovation is some of these old line industries that were built in the Midwest, where we have the biggest companies, biggest owners. And so I feel like there's never been a more exciting time to invest in the Midwest. And I'm seeing a lot of interest from the coast too, where they're interested in what deals we're investing in, because they understand too that this, they don't want to compete for the next social media deal. They want to figure out like what are the next. This is a big wave, I think.
Yeah. Keating, any thoughts?
I will stick firmly in my lane of space making and place making, but I think you're seeing a lot of CEOs pushing for employees to come back to the office. Jamie Dimon on a national level. We have a lot of CEOs in Chicago that are pushing for their employees to be back in the office. There's certainly a place for remote, both collaboration and work from home on your own, if that's your jam. But we're trying to create spaces that attract employees back to the office to collaborate. You can get on a Zoom, you can get on a video at any time, but you're scheduling it. Nobody schedules a Zoom for 15 minutes. Certainly it works when you're cross country, but having spaces where people can bump into each other in the hallway and solve a problem in 3 minutes as opposed to waiting till the next time they get together. When we helped McDonald's design their office space, obviously this is pre-pandemic, pre a lot of stuff that we're going through, they were very intentional in creating spaces, couches, little nooks everywhere where you could bump into somebody and solve that problem in just a few minutes. So I'm looking forward to kind of our innovation and creating those spaces to allow for that collaboration in person on a whim when you just bump into each other.
Let's talk a little bit about diversity in the startup ecosystem. And I'm very vocal on this, that we don't want to replicate Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley is too white, too male, too homogeneous. And I think our big differentiator is how can we make the most diverse, inclusive, and prosperous startup ecosystem. Let's start with you, Sonia. What are your thoughts on this? What are you seeing? We looked at the numbers. We are still far behind where we should be, but Chicagoland is leading in black and brown entrepreneurs and VC money invested, but still not where it should be. What are your thoughts? And then Keating and then Ted.
Yeah, I mean, I think that starting with the city, starting with the LPs, change needs to happen with the decision makers, because when there are different people deciding who gets capital, the world will change. And one thing that surprised me when I switched over from being a founder to being an investor is how subjective this job is, deciding between company A and company B in the same space, different founding teams, different experiences. At the early stages, there isn't a lot of data to go on, and so it is a very subjective job. So I feel very passionately about more women on the investing side, and then more women on the LP decision-making side as well, because I think that's how change will trickle down to the entrepreneurial communities.
On the real estate development side, it has historically been a white male-dominated industry, and that is changing. It's not changing fast enough. In our little world within Sterling Bay, we're changing that relatively quickly than what's going on out there. But we also deal with different sets of community around Chicago and around the country. One example is here at Lincoln Yards. The construction that we're doing, we have 30% minority and women-owned business hiring, and we're exceeding that, and that exceeds all other benchmarks around the city. And that's important because just to date, we currently have $38 million in our current projects going to women and minority-owned businesses. And that serves to grow the business, allows those businesses to hire, allows those businesses to grow their plant or grow their equipment. We also are very involved with Hire 360, which takes young black and brown individuals and brings them into the trade system. The trades are aging out, and it's a problem. And the Hire 360 teaches skills to allow them to get into the system to create a career that is lifelong.
So Chicago has an incredibly robust civic atmosphere of organizations and business leaders, civic leaders, government leaders, et cetera, that have made the diversification of our workforce and representation in Chicago priority number one. And as I said in the beginning, I spend a lot of my time outside of the US meeting with business and government leaders, and nowhere are they having the level of discussion that we have here in Chicago, discussion and action. And going out into the communities, making sure that businesses are being open, founders are being supported, people are being hired and invested in, et cetera. So I think Chicago is a world leader in that, and I know that firsthand. And it's inspiring for me to know that our leaders at every stage in every industry is focused on this issue, and we're making headway.
And I just add to that, we've seen the exact same example where we took what we do here in Chicago from the community engagement and the black and brown hire, minority and women-owned business hiring. We are doing a project in Durham and just outside the Triangle, and we came with that approach. And our project is adjacent to a neighborhood that is a historically black community. And when we showed up the first day, we didn't know what we were going to see. And when we were doing Lincoln Yards here, we kind of got pushed back on our heels and had some headwinds that were really tough. But we were embraced by the community because we came to them with a plan to engage with them and to include minority hiring in everything we were doing.
Let's talk about two slightly adjacent topics, because whenever I meet with CEOs or investors, when they make a decision, should I invest in Dallas or Miami or here, my thesis is always that two criteria are becoming more and more important. One is climate resiliency. So are the coasts kind of slowly being underwater and you don't want to invest so long term? And secondly, does it matter what values you as a community have? If you're welcoming community for immigrants, for the LGBTQ+ community, for migrants. So these are two criteria. Do I drink my own Kool-Aid, or is it really relevant when people make capital investment, moving decisions, startup decisions? Let me start with you, Ted.
So I have a friend named Parag Khanna, and he is an economist, and he's an author, and just an all-around brilliant mind. He and a number of people a couple years ago did an actual scientific study on looking at migratory patterns around the world, thinking about climate change, impact on business communities, et cetera. They did a global survey based on all of these different data points to figure out what is the number one place to move in the future and where they think that the center of business and community will be, and it's the Great Lakes. And this is a global survey. And because of all of these things, thinking about migratory patterns, thinking about the impact of rising sea levels, et cetera. So just from a pure safety standpoint, Great Lakes are a great place to be, and especially in Chicago, because we're not going to be underwater. But we're going to have incredible access to resources and talent in the future.
I mean, I can't say that factored into my decision when I chose to move back to Chicago. It was more quality of life, having a good infrastructure, culture, community, all of those things. But that makes sense to me.
As Ted mentioned earlier, we have an incredible civic community. And we now have an administration that I think is going to collaborate with that civic community. We didn't quite have that previously over the last 4 years. And so I think we've got a lot of runway there. I also think, when you talk about the communities that we have in the city, when we're going into a neighborhood or a community, they're so passionate about their community and they're welcoming, but they want to get their hands dirty and dig in and help shape what's going to happen in their community. And they're extremely passionate.
And I just want to add to that, in Chicago we have 77 unique neighborhoods. And each of those neighborhoods has their own sense of pride, Many have their own architecture, many have their own food options, et cetera. And so you've got a giant city with this great view of downtown and the lakefront, et cetera. But what makes Chicago incredibly unique are these 77 neighborhoods where you can get on your bike or on a Lime scooter or seat the public transportation and visit these different distinct communities and be like, wow, I had no idea how diverse and how interesting Chicago can be, and that's a real strength.
So if you look a bit broader, like almost globally, because we are in our work, we do a lot about, are we a super region, one of the top 20, 25 super region globally? Are we competing with Singapore, with London metropolitan area? Are we compete with China more and more every day? So is this too big of a question for us here in Chicago, or should we really think about how can we outcompete Singapore and other regions? Are we competing with them, or how are you guys thinking about that more global perspective? And whoever wants to speak first, because I know this is a bigger question maybe. I know Ted travels all the time, because I know when I try to follow him, he's always somewhere. So any thoughts on this, on how we're looking globally, how you're thinking about it? Keating, go ahead.
We're selling Chicago every day, and we realize that we're not just competing, whether we're here at Lincoln Yards or in Fulton Market, we're not just competing against the 78 or the Loop. We're competing to attract these companies from around the world, and they have options, and each company has a different focus on what their priorities are. But I think we're really well positioned, but we still have to sell Chicago.
Any other thoughts, anyone?
Chicago for sure, global city. O'Hare, our airport, more direct flights to international locations than I think any other airport. So it's really remarkable how easy it is to get in and out. Now, we're global in the sense that we have these 77 neighborhoods, that we've got Ukrainian village, and we have huge Polish population, Hispanic population, and so on and so forth. So that's great, but it's not like London or Dubai International. It's not, the streets aren't filled with Bugattis and oligarchs and things that you see some other interesting places. But the nice thing is that it is easy to get here, it is easy to get there. And when we think about trade, when we think about investment, I want startups to be founded in Chicago, and then I want them to fly and open up an office in the DIFC in Dubai. Or when I travel overseas, I tell the Chicago story day in and day out about how Chicago needs to be your North American destination when you want to expand overseas. And that resonates with people, because they hear about, New York is so big and it's all just, one industry specific, or Silicon Valley, and it's, as you were saying, it's got its own reputation and such. They're like, yeah, Chicago does make sense. Yes, there is a direct flight from anywhere to here. So I think that's actually one of our biggest kind of hidden strengths.
Yeah, I think all the infrastructure is there. It's a marketing question, and then it's right now I don't know that we have the critical mass of pure companies that are at a certain level, that are global companies. We definitely do at the later stages in technology. We're getting there.
So let's go bring back to Web3 and like fintech. There are a lot of the experts here. What are you most excited about when you look at that space, when you meet people, when you talk in the whole broader Web3 space, fintech space? What are you looking at and like, you wake up and you're just excited about the opportunities? Anyone wants to talk first on that?
I'll go first, and it'll be brief. I'm excited about bringing people together and collaborating, and I think when folks are in a space together and among other people, there's just so much runway, and there's a lot that can be done.
Yeah, I mean, I think philosophically, the idea of this core technology of blockchain, it makes a ton of sense. There are a bunch of funds, there are a bunch of people here in Chicago that are actually doing really interesting work. So I think it's an opportunity for Chicago to try to put a stake in the ground, if we wanted to be known for something, because there are a lot of other places where crypto is less accepted, and you don't have the same community infrastructure, et cetera.
I think in the US we have right now a truth and transparency, trustability problem. And I believe that Web3 applications, the whole concept behind it and the momentum that is happening in the space is going to, I don't know if it's going to solve our problems, but I think it's going to help some of our problems. And I've talked to groups in the past about how in the future truth is going to be a currency. And I think what we can do from a Web3 perspective can help bring some of that to the forefront. And if we can do better tracking and ownership rights and things, I think that will help maybe calm things down a little bit.
It also feels Chicago's always had such a great trading company DNA and talent that it feels like we have a right to win in the crypto space.
The other thing we have, Michael, is in and around Chicago is we have space. We have land, and it's great space and land to build data centers and power and everything that's going to power.
If you want to build, he can help you with that.
Yeah, he's like, let's do one last question, then we open up for the audience, because some of you might have a question as well, because I would like always to hear something. So any advice for right now, either if you're a startup entrepreneur or investor, that you would like to share? Who wants to start? Sonia, you're always. One advice for the investor and for the startup entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, I think for investors, this is the best time to invest when other people are pulling back from the market, prices have come down. Like if you want to invest in technology and startups, now is a great time to start. And as a founder, at the earliest stages, there's a ton of capital that was raised in funds in 2021, 2022 that now needs to be deployed. And so it's a great time to start a business. So it's a great time for technology.
I think everybody in Chicago is super nice. And it's right? I mean, everyone's so like, these guys are so nice. That
Mike, the words all about Michael, but
that's what Andy would consider.
Everybody is willing to help a founder grow their business, or get an introduction, or find access to capital. Anybody will set aside 15 minutes for a coffee. Anybody will walk to the side of the room at an economic club event or the 50 other events that happen on a daily basis here in Chicago. People here want to help, and I think one of the secret weapons for founders is to find those more seasoned business leaders who have gone through maybe what you're going through today, or they represent a large, more traditional organization that might have a need for your technological solution, or maybe they want to invest in your business. So I'm very pro-office. I want people going back to work. I want people mingling and being mentored and coming to events, because having these in-person interactions and saying, hey, can I grab 15 minutes with you, is critical to the growth of business, and Chicago is the best place in the world to do that.
Thank you. So open up for questions. Who is, because I would like to know if people, any questions, anything you're interested. It's not easy to get these three on one stage. So who's the courageous one? I mean, I can always call out on Paul to ask. No, go ahead, please.
So first of all, thank you for such an interesting panel. I did not know so much about Chicago until today. As someone who is not from Chicago, looking to have, tipping our toes in Chicago's markets, what would your advice be about a way to get started? I mean, obviously this wonderful event is one way, but what other ways, based on your experience being Chicago natives or Chicago advocates?
And just for context, what type of company or business are you in?
We're a VC from New York.
So let me start then as the one who is surprisingly not born here. So I think it's about networking. I think, like Ted said, figure out if it's Sonia, if it's Keating, if it's Ted, if it's Michael. Connect me with 3 more people, who connect another for 6 more people. You just meet. You're out for coffee, you're out for lunch, you're out for dinner, you're out for drinks. And I think just be part of this ecosystem here. Like Ted said, they're super friendly, but get involved. I think that is my key advice. Thoughts from the team?
Yeah, I mean, practically, tactically, the community is so small in Chicago that everybody kind of knows each other, and you're 1 degree of separation from most people. And so if you meet one VC, they're going to introduce you to 10 more. And so my tactical suggestion would be figure out who thematically, thesis-wise, you're most interested in connecting with. I guarantee you, if you email them and you say, hey, I'm interested in Chicago, I'm from New York, this is my investing thesis, they'll probably offer to set up a happy hour for you, because that's usually what I do when I get these emails. So you can feel free to email me. And I'll introduce you to 10 more VCs, and those 10 VCs will lead to 10 more conversations, and so on and so forth.
Chicago also has a great ecosystem of startup accelerators, technology hubs, et cetera. Sonia and I are both on the board of 1871, which a couple years ago was ranked the #1 private tech incubator in the world. We have healthcare one called M-Hub. There's manufacturing called Matter. Matter and M-Hub is manufacturing. We have these hubs where entrepreneurs are building and grinding day in and day out. Walk in there and start roaming the halls, and it's going to be like flies to honey. Just like everyone's going to be saying, "Hi, I'd love to grab a coffee with you." We have a lot of those.
Yeah, definitely reach out. Reach out to these three and to Paul. Between the four of them, they know everybody and are happy to introduce you to folks. And then World Business Chicago, the resources and the information, the data that they have to provide incoming companies and attracting companies is a great resource for anyone coming to Chicago.
Keating can get you a reservation at any table at any restaurant in town. It's really helpful. Get his business card.
I'm on a cleanse right now, Michael.
You just need to make the call to get a table. You don't have to be
Oh, I don't have to go.
Any other? Can we have time for one more question, please? If not, I'm calling on Paul.
Yeah, Michael, you do so much about public-private partnerships.
Yes.
Especially along the long-term vision of the lifting up all ties for all of those ties. Can you guys talk more about how you partner across different geographies, different public-private networks?
So I start and then hand it over to the rest. So the key thing for me is, my thesis on this is nowadays, to be successful as a business person, you cannot just be a business leader. You have to be a civic leader as well. If you don't invest in your time, your passion, your brilliance to make the community you live in a better place for everyone, you will not long-term be successful business leaders. That's for me the fundamental insight for any private and public partnership. And one of the reasons why I'm honored to be with three of them. All three are amazingly successful business leaders, but each of them are also highly civically engaged. That's the foundation of any public-private partnership. And that's, I think, also unique about Chicago. That's kind of my immediate answer. I'm sure the team has a few other thoughts.
I mean, that's part of the story that I tell around the world, is that we do have obviously a great business community, but we also have this layer of civic involvement, and we've got organizations, whether it is World Business Chicago or the Economic Club of Chicago, the Executives Club, the Commercial Club. We have all these organizations that are great about networking, great about developing and delivering content. We have places to meet in a lot of the incubator type spaces. So we have this atmosphere in which people can operate and learn and grow and develop. And that's really unique to Chicago. And as Michael was saying, like, you have to be civically engaged in order to be a successful business leader. That's not universally recognized elsewhere. And Chicago, that is ingrained in everybody. So that is one of our biggest strengths, in that we have this atmosphere of organizations. And when I go to other cities, I say, listen, we can help you develop startup hubs, and we can help find VC dollars and all of that, but you need to engage the business community civically in creating mentor relationships and leadership opportunities. And they're like, oh, like we don't do that here. So I think that's a secret weapon of ours.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very fortunate. The Pritzker Group Venture Capital Fund was founded by JB and Tony Pritzker, and they always had this ethos of a high tide rises all boats. If the Chicago ecosystem is doing well, then we're going to have a lot of companies to invest in, and so we need to support the people who are downstream of us. We need to support the people that are upstream of us. We need to support the broader community, and so part of the ethos at the firm is that almost, pretty significant amount of your time is spent getting back into the community and helping startups and founders. And I feel like in tech, the world is very nonlinear. Like, you don't know, you might do a coffee chat with somebody and you're helping them and making them an introduction, and they're, 3 years later they come and they are at the right stage for you to invest in. Or they end up having a successful exit and then they help one of your founders get that same outcome. And so, so I'm a big believer in just paying it forward, and I think that one of the big differences I've noticed, having lived in other tech ecosystems, comparing to New York especially, is I think the community can be a little bit more competitive, and here I 100% echo what Ted said, that it's a very collaborative community. Everybody's kind of in it to win it for Chicago.
Yeah, it can't be overstated, the civic and business community and giving back and helping folks that are already here in the community and others that are looking to come to Chicago. I think over the last 4 years, we've lost some of the old guard in that leadership. And fortunately, there have been a younger set that are stepping up, and that younger set is really broad. I think previously there have been a handful, like the Pritzkers, that have led in civic engagement, and now there's a broader set that are stepping up to the table.
So I want to thank all of the audience to be patient, to listen with us, and not needing subtitles when I speak. So thank you for being here, and thank you for this amazing panel. Like I said before, I'm a big admirer of all three of you. You're extremely successful in your profession, but you're always ready to give back to make all of Chicago a better place. So thank you.
So really quickly, Sonia said it. In it to win it for Chicago. That's a t-shirt we've got to have made. In it to win it for Chicago.
Thank you, everyone.